Welcome back. We now continue our journey through the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, picking up from where we left off in a previous episode. We had touched briefly on the Treaty of Hudaibiya. Why is the treaty significant, and what important events did it lead to in the life of the Prophet? Joining me is Dr. Shabir Ally to help us continue this journey through the life of the Prophet. Welcome to the show, Dr. Shabir.
Pleasure to be on.
So let's get right into it. What was the peace treaty of Hudaibiya, and why is it important?
In the 6th year after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had migrated from his hometown and went to live in peace in Medina, he now set out for a journey back to Mecca, the town from which who was previously driven out. And his purpose was to perform a minor pilgrimage. We know there's a major pilgrimage that happens at a set time in the year when about 2 million Muslims nowadays gather in Mecca for the performance of that pilgrimage. But then a minor pilgrimage can be made at any other time during the year. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had thus set out to perform a minor pilgrimage. So he and his band of followers on this pilgrimage, dressed in pilgrim's garb, were stopped short. They could not enter the city of Mecca. They had to camp at a place called Hudaibiya, and there they entered into negotiations with their opponents who prevented them from entering the city, and that came to be known as the Treaty of Hudaibiya.
So from the sound of it sounds like this also led to the concept that we know of, which is the opening of Mecca. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, the Treaty of Hudaibiya actually has important significance for what would follow and for what you refer to as the opening, which we can describe in detail. But if you allow me, I'll say a little bit more about this treaty. The treaty appeared to be one-sided. To begin with, as we know nowadays, there is religious freedom, and it rubs against our sensitivity to say that you're blocking somebody from entering a place of worship. So this is essentially what the non-Muslims were doing to the Muslims at that time. They were blocking them from entering the sacred precincts where they can perform their religious rites. And this is unacceptable, obviously, but the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, accepted that, and he wanted to move forward with a peace treaty, though his followers found that this is unacceptable. How could it be like this? Why should the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, be entering into a peace treaty? If they block us, we should go in fighting. But the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, no, let's do this. And now, the entering into the treaty by itself was hard for the Muslims to accept, but at the same time, the Prophet, peace be upon him, went further than this, and he accepted clauses in the treaty which further aggravated his Muslim followers. But by all of this, he showed himself to be a sage leader, and he was seeking peace by every reasonable means possible. So as part of the treaty, it was stipulated that if one of the Muslims who had joined the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, now decided he doesn't want to stay with the Prophet anymore, he wants to go back to the Meccans, then he would be allowed to do so. But if one of the Meccans during the period of the treaty should suddenly think, oh, well, wait a minute, Islam looks like a good idea, I want to be a Muslim and I want to join the Prophet Muhammad, now that person would not be allowed to join. So it's a one-sided affair, like this, the valve where people flow one way but not the other. And other such stipulations made it difficult for the Muslims initially to see the benefit of this. It looks almost like a sellout. How could the Prophet make this kind of arrangement with the enemy? But the Prophet, peace be upon him, established the treaty. Now, the treaty remained in force for 17 months thereafter until the non-Muslims broke the treaty. And within those 17 months, the historians now relate that more people entered the faith of Islam than had entered the faith of Islam in the 17 years before that of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, preaching.
So was that a strategy almost, if we think about it now, that Prophet agreed upon his terms, and then it so happened that, there are more Muslims entering now than ever before?
Well, in hindsight, we can see the wisdom of that strategy, because you see, if you are at war with other people, and this was the situation previously, that the non-Muslims were coming in one battle after another to attack the Muslims. Now the Muslims had gained some strength after the Battle of the Trench, which is called the Battle of the Allies, had failed. The non-Muslims. They came in a large allied force to snuff out the Muslim population, but they failed in that attempt. So now it comes to be known that the Muslims are a force to be reckoned with. But the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, rather than assert that force and say, here we are big, strong, and powerful, now you have to deal with us as a military might, he set out peacefully to make pilgrimage. And in that pilgrimage, he enters into a treaty showing that he has the desire for peace. Now, why does that work for Muslims? You see, Islam is a message to the world, and if that message is to be conveyed to other nations and to other people, then it has to be conveyed in peaceful circumstances. If there is war going on, then people hardly stop to think about a message about religion. People respond to a fight or flight mechanism, a kind of automatic response. If they can fight you, they stay and fight. If they can't, they flee. So either fight or flight. But in peacetime, people interact with each other. They share ideas. And then if Islam is a good idea, which we believe it is, then non-Muslims would be more privy to that idea. Now they can stop and think and say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Why am I not a Muslim? Maybe I ought to be a Muslim too. And this is what happened in those 17 months. Non-Muslims were thinking about Islam, and they were becoming Muslims. So it is said by one historian that when the Prophet, peace be upon him, took his followers on this pilgrimage to Hudaibiya, when he was stopped at Hudaibiya, on that Umrah trip, he had only 1,400 followers. But a couple of years later, when he entered Mecca during the opening, he had 10,000 followers with him. So we went from 1,400 all the way to 10,000, and that showed a very rapid expansionary or inflationary expansion of the Muslim community.
Were there any specific surahs revealed during this time that promoted the Prophet's opening or his approach to the treaty that he took?
Yes, the 40th chapter of the Quran is referred to as the chapter of the opening, Surah Al-Fath. And that chapter begins by saying, Inna fatahna laka fatham mubina. We have granted you a clear victory. Now, the victory that this chapter referred to would not have been immediately apparent because only a treaty had been signed. But it would turn out that the victory or the opening which God had now prescribed for Muslims and granted them would have been the opening of Mecca, which was previously closed to the Muslims, but now would be open for Muslims to come in there and be free to practice their faith, as people are now largely free to practice their faith in most developed nations.
I know you talked a little bit about, what does this have to do with us today and an emphasis on peace, but I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that. So is the idea just taking the example of the way the Prophet signed on the Treaty of Hudaybiya, it was one-sided, but he signed off on it. So is that, the approach that we should be taking given the times that we're living in, even though we know something might be one-sided, where we're peaceful and so we're going to accept it and then, deal with the situation at the time and respond that way? Or what other lessons can we extract from this?
I think you summed it up nicely, even though you were asking questions. But the point is well taken. Yes, this is basically the Muslim objective, to establish peace. And sometimes peace comes at a cost. Sometimes you have to compromise. Some pills are bitter, hard to swallow. But you grin and bear some things because you feel that there is a bigger or greater objective. If you establish peace, that is what our religion is about, and our religion is peace. And when peace is everywhere, that is our religion. When justice is established, that is our religion. The Quran says that God sent prophets to establish justice among human beings. So if we are representatives of the prophets, we want justice to be established, and justice is established through peace. So we sometimes compromise to allow for this broader objective and this most significant objective to be achieved. At the same time, there are reasonable limits to most things. So some people say there is no peace without justice, and sometimes it is necessary that peace and justice go hand in hand and be established together. So we must not turn a blind eye to considerations of justice. At the same time, we should do what we can to establish peace together with justice.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.